Wonderful. Good morning, everybody. I'm so pleased to be here on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, speaking to community and stakeholders about the future during these difficult times. But can I start by thanking the nearly 20,000 people that came forward and got tested to 8 p.m. last night. It's almost double what we had the previous day, and I can't tell you how grateful I am. Also in that period, we had zero community transmission, both great signs of having no community transmission and also having higher rates of testing. We had a good health advice this morning and consultation with colleagues, and the best health advice is that we should wait another week before we ease restrictions. But I do want to assure the community that the government's intention is to get as close to pre-Avalon conditions as possible next week. That is what we're aiming towards. So if we keep the case numbers low, and it doesn't have to be zero every day, but so long as the case numbers remain low and so long as the rates of testing are pretty good, that we will move as close to pre-Avalon as possible in a week's time. And I want to in particular highlight the concerns expressed to us by events around weddings, because we know the angst that's causing people, and this is the last weekend you'll have to go through before there'll be some relief. And we appreciate for families and also for those who are conducting those events the financial and emotional stress that has been caused. But please know that if things continue the way they are, by this time next week, there will be certainly decisions made around getting to us as close as possible to pre-Avalon conditions. I will say, however, that we do want to encourage people to go back to work in a COVID-safe way. We do want to make sure that we have the right settings in place, given there are more contagious strains of the virus, and for that reason, some settings may stay in place. And in particular, I'd like to highlight masks, for example, on public transport might be something that stays in place indefinitely. But for the vast majority of restrictions, we would like to see things go back to pre-Avalon as closely as possible next week. And I do want to say to the community, thank you for your patience, thank you for supporting our health advice, and thank you for coming on this journey, because together we've achieved the results we have and relief is around the corner. Now, if we move too quickly in easing all these restrictions, that could cause a flare-up we don't want. But more importantly, we don't want to be in a position where we're announcing things ad hocly. We'd much rather go back to the community and say, pretty much things are reverted back to what they were pre the Avalon cluster breakout, and that's the position we'd like to be in about a week's time. And I just want to thank everybody for your vigilance and thank everybody for coming forward to get tested if you have the mildest of symptoms. And we also appreciate that some times of the year and some days causes more people to come forward for testing than others. But so long as we keep the number of cases low and as close to zero as possible, obviously zero community transmission is our aim, because unless you can guarantee that, or at least unless you can get close to that, there is always the risk of a flare-up, which we don't want. But so long as we can keep case numbers zero or confined to existing household contacts, and so long as we have good rates of testing in the next week, there's no reason why we can't go back as closely as possible to pre-Avalon conditions, with the exception potentially of masks in some high-risk settings, which we think is a good way to give people confidence to be able to go about their business, especially in relation to returning to work, and especially returning to work in a COVID-safe way in the larger cities, in our CBDs, which prior to this year, we're experiencing enormous drop-offs in people going back to those normal workplaces. So deep gratitude to the community for allowing New South Wales to get where we are. But also, can I say that whilst I'm on the mid-north coast, what a great couple of days it's been to really get a sense from the community in the regions about how they're bearing up during COVID. And certainly what I've learned is that people in the regions, especially in this community, mid-north coast, whilst these are very challenging times, many businesses and community organisations have managed to adjust and actually succeed and grow during this time. And that's really given me a sense of confidence about what New South Wales is capable of moving forward and what the regions are capable of. And it was pretty good to be able to listen to businesses and organisations who've conveyed how they've managed to really pivot or adjust their business given the current difficulties and really managed to thrive. And I just want to thank the community of the Mid-North Coast for your positive attitude, for your sense of enthusiasm, but also for your resilience. And it's really been heartening to see. And certainly it's that resilience which I think will allow our regions to grow and thrive during what is otherwise an extremely difficult condition off the back of a deep drought, floods, which this community has experienced, but also on top of that, obviously, the bushfires and the pandemic. And all those things combined have impacted on the resilience of the community and really allowed communities like this to shine. And please know that the government's support through infrastructure funding, whether it's roads and health and transport, will make sure, and education will make sure that we support the community during this time. And I, in particular, want to thank and acknowledge Minister Pavey. Not only is this her electorate, but her major responsibilities across the state in water and property and housing have ensured the government is able to deliver in those vital areas. And I wanted to thank and acknowledge her contribution, but also ask her to say a few words about the Mid-North Coast, and then we'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier. We stand here today on Gumbaynggirr land, and it is beautiful. And I think the Mid-North Coast, thanks to the leadership of this government, of the Premier who's led the nation, in ensuring that people have a sense of safety and security as we battle this virus, has been very strong and very sound. Our caravan parks, our motels, our hotels, our accommodation has been full, but we've also had the security of the contact tracing, and I just want to acknowledge Service New South Wales in particular for the strength that they have shown and the leadership to give people the certainty that it is safe for people to come from other parts of Australia, other parts of Sydney to holiday and be part of our annual summer holidays. And our region has done incredibly well. Some big challenges, having enough staff to be able to run the businesses, but we have done well because of the security that the Premier has led, and ensuring that people can be safe and secure during this really uncertain period, which has followed bushfires. And I thank the Premier also for being here today and the support the government has shown our communities, and we'll be talking to a lot of those people that 12 months ago were just reeling from facing another threat. So it's great to have you here, Premier, and be able to showcase what our region is, how magnificent it is, and more people are discovering that and realising that this is a great option other than Sydney. So there's some big challenges ahead in terms of housing and all those sort of things, but wonderful to have you here. Very proud of the way you have led our government and our team and ensuring that New South Wales is leading Australia in handling this issue.
When you say pre-Avalon conditions, does that include going back to the 2 square metre rule outside?
Yeah.
That was a big thing for business.
No, potentially. We are looking to move as closely as we can to what we had pre-Avalon. And however, I do want to foreshadow that mask wearing in certain settings might be something we keep indefinitely because what we do want to do is encourage people to be able to move around as much as possible freely, resume their workplaces, travel where they need to go to. And the reason why we may make that approach in terms of the mask wearing is because we're still looking at the impacts of the greatest, the strains of the virus that are emerging. We know that they're more contagious, and we just want to give people that additional line of defence. But that is just one example of something we might keep in place longer. But generally speaking, we are keen to get as close to pre-Avalon conditions as we can, and that will depend on the health advice. But we're also very keen to make sure what we announce is simple and holistic, rather than a decision here or there, because we want to move forward in a confident way to demonstrate our ability to deal with outbreaks when they occur, but also our ability to bounce back and give people confidence, especially as people are thinking about going back to work, going back to school, and we want people to feel they can do that in a very COVID-safe way. No, because what we have now are greater freedoms than what we've had previously during the pandemic, and we have to be very careful to acknowledge that masks are the 4th line of defence. So previously we'd encourage people to work from home, but we're not doing that anymore. We're encouraging people to think about how they can go back to their workplace in a COVID-safe way. So allowing us to maintain some of those settings around mask wearing gives us that additional fourth line of defence, as we call it. Remember to make sure you get tested if you have the mildest of symptoms and stay home until you get health advice to the contrary. Make sure you hand sanitise, make sure you keep that physical distancing. And then the masks in some indoor settings, which are higher risk, have that additional line of defence. And we hope that additional line of defence will encourage people to think about working in their workplace, think about resuming normal activity as much as possible in a COVID-safe way. And we may very well find that at a point in time, if we are confident that we're managing the new strains of the virus and we're managing the pandemic as best as we can, that those type of restrictions will be eased as well.
Are you concerned that by easing restrictions it could make other states a bit more apprehensive towards New South Wales?
No, I mean they're decisions other states will take according to their own settings. But in New South Wales, we'll always try and strike the right balance of providing the health and safety for our citizens, but also for making sure that we allow the economy to grow stronger, for jobs to grow and for people to have their livelihoods protected, and that's very important to us to get that balance right. Different states have different approaches, but I want to stress all states have the ambition of zero community transmission, and that's certainly the case in New South Wales. And I'm pleased that in the last week we've seen a number of days where we've managed that, but obviously we want that trend to continue.
Just on asking, so the fact that it was so low when you were still calling for people to wear them on public transport and stuff before you made it mandatory, is that a reason why you're looking to just keep it mandatory?
No, I think what's really important is that you have to look at the whole range of settings you're putting in place. And if you want to send the message to people that it's still safe to move around in certain settings and there's a fourth line of defence with mask wearing, well, that's a good thing. If you want to encourage people to think about where they're going to work from in the new year, if you want to encourage our CBDs, particularly the Sydney CBD and other major centres to thrive, well, certainly you need to consider all those settings. And I'm not suggesting it's a definite that we'll continue that mask wearing in those settings, but it is an option we're considering, and I just wanted to be very upfront with everybody to say most other settings we're confident will get close to pre-Avalon, but mask wearing may be something that we keep going for a little while longer. But of course we'll keep the community updated about that. I think it's really important to have those conversations openly and publicly so that the community appreciates what our thinking is guided by and what the health advice is telling us as well.
How big is the New South Wales economy not having international travel?
Look, there's no doubt that is an enormous hit to the Australian economy, to major cities like Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. Not having international travel is a huge burden we have to wear, which is why I am so strident about at least having no internal borders within Australia. That will keep domestic travel, domestic tourism. It'll allow more trade between the states. It'll allow economic activity to thrive. It'll keep people in jobs. And most importantly, on a human level, it will mean people can see their relatives and loved ones. And that's why I'm so strident about keeping our internal borders at least open to each other, because we don't know what the answer is as to how long we won't be able to have international travel. But we do have some control about internal borders. And if we want to keep people in jobs, if we want to keep tourism alive, if we want to keep the states growing, and remember, if we don't consume and buy and sell off each other in Australia, we'll see GST revenue go down, which will again cause economic challenges. So that's why I've been so strident about that, because managing COVID is managing our economic health and wellbeing as much as our physical health and wellbeing. And that's why I believe very strongly we need to look at our internal borders, because that will allow jobs, the economy and health to actually progress in a more positive way.
For 2 days in a row, we've seen you alongside Nationals colleagues. How disappointed are you to be running again against the
Oh, look, that's a matter for them, and we always have healthy decisions along the way. And John Barilaro and I continue to have what I believe is the strongest coalition in the nation, and I look forward to continuing that.
Do you welcome more three-quarter contests?
Well, no, look, we obviously, what we tend to do is always have negotiations about that, but rather than get into the detail of that, can I assure the community that the Deputy Premier and I are focused on managing our state as best as we can during these difficult times, and that is what we spend 99.9% of our time on.
You said the Liberals are breached the coalition agreement in the way that they handled the situation. I guess what he said was poaching Nationals. Do you agree with that?
Oh, look, I'm focused on, again, leading the state during these difficult and challenging times, and that's what takes up 99% of not just my time, but the time of my team as well.
How confident are you that the Liberals will hold that seat?
Look, I'm not willing to make any predictions about next week, let alone next year, so let's move on. I'm not even, I haven't turned my mind to those things, to be honest.
Can I just ask on testing program? Is 19,000, is that something I mean, you seem relatively happy with that, but Dr. Chan was sort of more wanting it at 20,000. Are you still looking to maybe even boost that?
Look, the higher the testing rate, the more confident we feel, but to have it go up nearly double in one day is pretty positive. So we had about 10,000 the previous day and then nearly 20,000 to 8 p.m. last night. So to have it doubled in one day is pretty positive. We do need to maintain those high rates of testing, but please know that Dr. Chan and the health experts will always say it's people who have the mildest of symptoms to come forward and get tested, or else if you've been to one of the venues that health has listed. So please make sure you're always looking up the website. newsouthwales.gov.au is the single source of truth in New South Wales, and that gets you to various other websites if you need that information. But make sure you're always looking up, even in regional communities where people have travelled, make sure that you're looking up the venues that where someone with the virus has been. Make sure you're following the health advice because it's really important for that to occur. And we appreciate it on some days. There'll be more people who come forward. We also know there's always a dip on weekends, so Mondays and Tuesdays tend to have lower testing rates than Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We pick it back up. But we just need that consistent rate of testing. The higher it is, the more confidence it gives the health experts to give us advice about restrictions, and that's why we require the extra week. To give us time to assess the low to zero cases whilst testing rates are what they are, and I feel that the community would feel comfortable with that.
Is there local communities in terms of their adherence? Is there a sense of complacency in some of the regional areas about COVID restrictions?
Given we haven't had any community transmissions within our region, you would expect there'd be community complacency, but I think there's not. I think there's a strong adherence when you're entering venues. I'm really, as a former owner of a restaurant and cafe, I'm surprised at how well everyone has got the app working, and you've got that ability to trace where people have been. I think that's the most important thing. So everyone has done that, and you know that is really, really important. But people are respectful, and I think Avalon and what people of Sydney were going through during the Christmas period has been a reminder of how only one person can change it. And we had the fellow that went through the central west of New South Wales, and you know everybody knew where he'd been, so we were able to track and trace that. That's what people are on board for. We know we're in a different world. We know we're operating in a way that we've never had to face as a modern age, and I think the way people have accepted it is a testament to the strength and resilience and the sensibility of our communities. Look, I'm not here to talk about those issues. I think the community wants us to focus on the jobs at hand, which is keeping them safe and building infrastructure, and I'm very proud to be part of a government, a great coalition government. I'm a very proud National Party person, and we've seen the Pacific Highway dual carriageway completed just before Christmas. The infrastructure that's coming out to New South Wales is incredible. Today we've got 3 great announcements for really important communities in my patch. I can look across here at the Urunga Boardwalk and the Urunga Lido. That's what our communities want us to focus on, delivering infrastructure and good government and good management. And I'm focused on absolutely a 4th record term in government. That's what we have to do to continue the good work for regional New South Wales. Look, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on being a good government, a disciplined government.
Just on testing, sorry, lastly, Premier, just would you consider pushing this back another way if restrictions being eased if testing drops off?
Well, obviously, it's the combination of low to zero rates of community transmission and good rates of testing that is the perfect combination you need to ease restrictions. And we feel we're nearly there, but the health advice is please wait another week. So long as we are on this same path over the next week, we look forward to being able to ease restrictions and give the community further relief. But in the main, as I travel around the regions and also Greater Sydney, people have really adjusted well and they understand the position we're in, and I'm so grateful that compliance has been really high. Got an update from our authorities this morning, including the police, and I just want to thank everybody for your patience. It's a frustrating time for all of us, and the patience and the commitment the community has shown has just been amazing. Thanks, everybody.